Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio this morning on my immediate right is Dr. Alphonse Kanga, the Regional Chair for the National Council of Churches of Kenya. Good morning, Dr. Ayub.
Good morning.
Happy having you here and Happy New Year.
Asante sana.
Dr. Lukoya Atuoli is the Dean of the Medical College East Africa at the Aga Khan University. Good morning, Dr. Ayub.
Morning.
Much appreciated for your time. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
And Steve Ogola is an advocate of the High Court. Steve, good morning.
Morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy.
And Sheikh Ibrahim Lithome is a Muslim scholar as well, joins us this morning here on the broadcast. Good morning, Sheikh.
Morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And by the way, that's a translation of may the peace and the blessings of the Almighty God be upon all of us.
Thank you.
Happy having you here on the broadcast. Gentlemen, our focus will be on the battle for values and virtue. And this in light of the abductions and the spree in the aftermath of Kenyans who went missing in December, and how the responsibility was deflected on the part of the institution of parenting. In a moment, we'll be getting to that, but first let's begin with a quick look at the front pages of the publications. And the Daily Nation says the men who owe Kenyans the answers. On the spot and under the spotlight are the Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja and the Interior CS Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen on enforced disappearances of government critics. Their action, says the paper, and inaction have seen some rights defenders initiate court processes to take the abduction cases even to the International Criminal Court in The Hague in the Netherlands. The Standard says abduction, what does this man know? And that is the Inspector General of Police, who is expected today to appear in court and explain the mysterious disappearances of young Kenyans. Should the country expect answers from the police boss? First, Dr. Lukoye, coming to you. Is the direction of travel right?
I think we have a problem as a country to begin with, in the sense that we tend to legitimize violence and victimization of people. Our first instinct when somebody has suffered injustice is to ask them, why did they put themselves in a situation where they would suffer injustice? And yet, we have written in our constitution that people shouldn't suffer injustice. So if you're born Kenyan, if you live in this country, you expect not to suffer injustice. But when you do, our first instinct is to ask us, what were you doing there when you suffered this injustice? So when people reported that their children or their relatives or their friends were being abducted, there are many Kenyans whose first instinct was to ask, but why did you do what you did to justify being abducted? Our constitution says nobody should be abducted. Everybody should be subjected to due process of the law. But our first instinct is to ask, but why did you do what you did to justify being abducted? There's nothing on this earth that justifies somebody being subjected to extrajudicial processes, being abducted and being treated in that way. But our first instinct as Kenyans is to think, but what did you do? Why did you do that so that somebody thought that they could abduct you in order to meet some kind of requirement? I think there is that disconnect between what we say every Kenyan is entitled to and what we do when people annoy us, when people disrespect us, and so on. I would just say, and Wakili will probably clarify, there's no right not to be disrespected. There's no such right. When you get into a position of authority and when you're taking care of a large number of people, among those people, there'll be somebody who will not agree with you, there'll be somebody who will disrespect you, there'll be somebody who will insult you. You have absolutely no right not to be insulted. So these are moral issues that we have to think about and say, if I do not want to be insulted, what should I do? Rather than what should the law do to prevent people from insulting me? The law cannot protect you from being insulted, from being disrespected and being mistreated.
All right, we'll talk about the moral compass of the country and the right to be offended and the right not to be offended. Steve, coming to you. Given what we had witnessed towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, now day 8, do you think the sluggish manner in which the government has been coming out with the answers is healthy?
I think the government has not done a great job
in terms of explaining the interventions taken so far in establishing the whereabouts of these young people who went missing. Number one, they went missing at a time when there were fierce critics of the government. So there was a genuine contention that perhaps they could have been disappeared as a result of their artistic expression, which was deemed to be heavily critical. And we can debate the limits of that artistic expression later, but that was the context in which they went missing. Reports of missing persons were filed in various police stations. I think what the government ought to have done, and if they did, may have missed it, is timeous update on the interventions taken so far. So this is a clarion call to the office of the spokesperson of the, I think in the IG's office, to communicate with clarity and timeously on the status of the progress on investigations. We do not need a judicial intervention to get a report of missing persons, and they can always make exceptions. Reports of missing persons are made on a routine basis daily, but there are some that are very peculiar and have generated a lot of national interest because of the political circumstances in which those people went missing. So I think the first observation is these people were reported missing. What interventions, if at all, were taken by investigative agencies to establish their whereabouts? And if those interventions were taken, how was that communicated to the public? So that then the debate would then shift on the quality and intensity of investigations. You get? I think that has been a bit of a challenge, but I think for me it suffices to say, Ayub, the Constitution at Article 33 recognizes and celebrates artistic expression as part of the cocktail of our freedom of expressions. There is some healthy tension between Article 33 of the Constitution and Article 10 of the Constitution. Healthy tension because, yes, there is freedom of expression that recognizes, protects, and promotes artistic expression, but the Constitution also requires and appeals to us that as we express ourselves within those limits, we pay attention to our national values. What is it that is distinctively Kenyan? If we are expressing ourselves in Kenya and others are expressing themselves in the States, in the United States, what is it that would say this is distinctively Kenyan and this is distinctively someone else? Okay. So we have to debate, and I think I like this kind of debate. And what this debate then provokes is the quest for national renewal. Okay. A national renewal towards strengthening our value system. We don't need to castigate or punish people who express themselves, but we also need to ask ourselves, how do we pay attention to the personal integrity and dignity of the people around us? As Prof has said, if you are in positions of power, then you must be amenable, as by legal, by law required, to a higher threshold of scrutiny. And that scrutiny means people will tell you things that you do not necessarily want to hear. So I think you need to wire your mind to accept that reality. Now, the people that critique government also need to pay some attention, pay some attention to the limits of that expression. It is not true, Ayub, that that expression is so far-reaching and so broad that it does not impose limits. What I'm saying, the limits are not necessarily criminal, or sanctions are not necessarily criminal. These are personal responsibility concerns. Okay. What is it, as a rational thinker, who is not happy with the state of the economy or the way the government is operating, and I want to express myself, what is it that I can consider as acceptable communication and what is not? Okay. That debate is ongoing and we are happy to advance it.
And by extension, of course, we have some time to delve deeper into that. Dr. Alphonse Kanga and Sheikh Ibrahim Lithome, I'll come to you. The men of God, we are all men of God, but you have taken a lead role in advocating for good governance, and statements were issued on how the governance system is, the unhealthy nature of it, and what needs to be fixed. But this seems to be an overriding priority, is it, given that it involves lives, and it's the government responsibility to take care of the sanctity of life?
That is true. It's the government responsibility to do that. But I wanted to start from where my colleagues have just talked about, where did this start? This starts from the mind. What's the foundation of this? The foundation of what we are seeing in Kenya is basically how the country was created. How was our country formed? How did we create our system? Number one, you need to realize that our system was created on the issue of encouraging divide and rule. And divide and rule means this is mine, I can do anything to protect my space. Our neighbors on the other side, they started on this value system that you are my brother. Wewe ni ndugu yangu kutoka Pemba, wewe ni ndugu yangu Mtanzania kutoka, and Nyerere Mwalimu started on that. Ours started on the issue that it belongs to me. The principle is, this is my meat, and nimechinja ng'ombe, leta kisu tukate tukule. From that value system where it belongs to me, this is mine and this is where I belong, and you are there, I am there, that's where the value system is. The mindset that I can do anything to protect my space. So what are we doing here? I'm doing this to make sure that I say, that's why you hear statements like, you need to keep quiet, because if you don't keep quiet, we can even go for more than you think. If you don't keep quiet, I'll do this to silence you. I'll do this to make sure that you keep quiet. So all this is fabrication, is gimmick to make sure that people toe the line. And it is within our values, our mindset, that where the foundation of the nation started. So to me, is this right or wrong? It is wrong. It is primitive. It's uncalled for to think that if I think that you are not what I want you to be, you take me somewhere, you get me away from the society. That's unacceptable. It's not godly even. You are injuring my inner person as a person. But how do you value me? You value me as them and we in the country. They are, I am not. I am, they are not. So the issue, the value system of how do I value you from a particular corner of the country? Are you? This value system where somebody will go to an extent where there is this thing taking place and you see a police vehicle in a police station, a police vehicle with a police name that we have never seen in Kenya. What are you trying to do? You are using gimmick to silence me. Those are just something come from your mind, something you are creating something from your mind to silence me, not to tell you no. What's the value system? Mindset and how you are wired as Kenyans. As Kenyans, Nyakua, the principle of Nyakua, and let me do what I want and you can stay aside, provided I'm eating. When we deal with the eating system, with me and myself, then we're able to get out of this game.
How do we remedy the status quo then?
We need to have a national discussion and agree, what is this that is valuable? What is this that's acceptable? Are you my brother? And how far are you my brother? Are you my brother because we are eating together? One of the things I realized recently is that where we are as Kenyans, the head of state has just helped all of us to understand that all the politicians are the same, provided they are eating. If they are eating, all is well. If they are not eating, then there is something wrong.
All right. So when they feed from the same trough, then their interests are common.
Yes.
Yeah. Sheikh Ibrahim Lithome, today the IG, by extension, will be talking about and whether the political class has the moral standing and authority to lecture Kenyans on good values, given what they normally practice on the podiums. Today, the Inspector General, Sheikh Ibrahim Lithome, will be in court to explain the mysterious disappearances of Kenyans. Given the experience we had with Gilbert Masengeli and the Kitengela Three, Aslam and the Longton brothers and Bob Njagi, they are released, and his then hours later appearance in court vis-a-vis their release on Monday and today IG's appearance in court. Do you read concurrence and do you expect answers as a Kenyan?
Ayub, let me begin. Let me pick from what my colleagues have also said, then respond to your question here. You know, listening and looking at what is happening in the country here, it's like we have justified what is said, like the end justifies the means. The question is this: do Kenyans have genuine grievances and problems? The answer is yes. And what is the solution to those problems? Are we getting the right solution to those problems? And looking at what is happening and the experience in the past few days, it's like, as long as I have a problem, then the end justifies the means. I'll use any means to solve my problem. And sometimes instead of solving the problem, we end up aggravating the situation. And it's both sides. It's the both ends. We find people in responsible positions in government. The people, we say, the buck stops with them, whether they want it or not, because we have the Constitution of Kenya, and it tells us who is responsible for what. When people disappear, who is supposed to give us answers? Somebody somewhere is supposed to give us answers by the Constitution, because they have the responsibility and the resources. And when there are no answers, Kenyans are bound to speculate. The lawyer just told us here, the Constitution also has provided the right to information. When somebody says we don't have information, where do we get that information from? So it's a question of people failing in their duties and people focusing more on their rights rather than on their duties. Now, the AG appearing before court, is it called for? I say yes. He has a duty to tell Kenyans what is happening. Because if he has no answers, tell me, who else has the answers? You as a journalist, you don't have the answer. As a religious leader, he doesn't have the answer. As a lawyer, as a medical practitioner here, he doesn't have the answers to that, because we have somebody by Constitution who sits in office there with all the resources to tell Kenyans when something goes wrong with the security. Yeah. So I want to begin by saying this, Abdul Kadir. We need to take our responsibilities more seriously. And I think we need to talk the walk. Because if you ask me or ask the lawyer, what does the Constitution say about our values? I'll tell you, it's so beautiful, but it's just ink on paper. It's just very good values. Actually, we keep on claiming, and I have no doubt about it, we have one of the most progressive constitutions. The Bill of Rights, beautiful. Well done by our lawyers here. Our legal brains did a wonderful job. But it stops there. And the Constitution is only as good as its implementation. So you go to Article 10 of the Constitution, beautiful values. But the people who are supposed to lead by examples, I think they're the ones who have failed, as Abdul Kadir. When the head of the family, I'm talking about a household, I'm the head of my family, like all of us are, the children will listen to me. If I'm the kind of father who, when a neighbor knocks the door, I tell them, Mwambie siko. Then tomorrow I tell my child, don't lie. Am I leading by example? So I think it's a high time. I think we need to crack. Unajua, kuna kitu kinaitwa jipu, Abdul Kadir, right? Jipu is a boil. Daktari is here. You can't treat it by hiding it. You lazima ulitibue hilo jipu. I think it's the high time now. You're asking us, what should we do? Tunahitaji kutibua hilo jipu. It might be painful, but that's what we need to do. Where do we begin from? Samaki huoza kuanzia kichwani. We need to begin from the top there. Let them lead by example. Abdul Kadir, there is a time I had my kids at home saying, talking to one another and saying, hey, unafikiri hii ni ya mama yako? Then I wanted to know, where did my child pick that from? From some political leaders on TV, on national TV, insulting one another. His ya mama yako. What kind of example are they giving? So the answer is we need to begin from the top, lead by example, okay? And the buck stops with you, who we gave you the mandate. I'm not talking about you. The person we gave the mandate to lead this country. The buck stops with them. And the lawyer said here, the scrutiny, the threshold of scrutiny is higher, the higher you are.
All right, and the person you talked about, where your kids picked up the wording from, was the former majority leader who was speaking in Bomet County then some years back. Dr. Lukoye, now let's get into it. In the battles of values and virtues, given the address by politicians of parents now to take up the responsibility to inculcate values in children, do they have the moral pedestal to lecture parents?
I think Kenyan parents are inculcating values in their children, whether the politicians tell them to do it or not. They are doing it. And those values are what are defining how Kenya is becoming. One of the things that I have observed over the past few years is that we have young people who actually read the Constitution, they read the law, they read policies, and these young people were not raised in an environment of deceit and lies, and they actually believe what they read. And after they read it, they expect their parents and the leaders to actually follow what is written in law, in policies, in the constitution, and so on. And so they get bewildered when they see these people not following what is written. They are actually wondering what's going on. Like the law says, if you're in this position of responsibility, these are the things you're supposed to do, but you're not doing them, or you're doing the opposite of those things. And they come out and ask, but what's going on here? You're supposed to be doing what is written here, and you're not doing it. And this is how we have raised our children. These are the values we've inculcated in them. We have told them, if I tell you I will do something, I should do it. And if I don't, you can question me. And this is a generation of children that are now coming of age. More than 2/3 to 3/4 of our population are people under 35. Mm-hmm. They're young people. And they're the ones who are raised in an environment where you're supposed to do what you say you will do. Unfortunately, when we talk about our leaders, the vast majority of our leaders are old people, old men, if I may say so.
And women?
Men.
Okay.
Majority of our leaders are old men. Mm-hmm. And these old men, I think we are placing too much responsibility on them when we expect them to thrive under the 2010 Constitution, because they were raised under tyranny. They were raised in an environment where you only did what you were ordered to do. Mm-hmm. They were raised in an environment where people followed orders, and if you didn't, you were killed, or you were punished, or you were detained, or you were exiled. This is the leaders that we have. And it's a little unfair to expect them to thrive under the 2010 Constitution. So I think the solution ultimately might be, letting go of some of these old men who are in charge of the systems in this country, including some on this panel, and with apologies. The other thing is that the politicians.
How do we phase out the old guard?
Well, we have elections, we have people retiring, we have people being called back to their makers and so on. So time will do that trick. The politicians that are asking Kenyan parents to be responsible are way more irresponsible than the average Kenyan parent. The average Kenyan parent expects certain things of their children. And the children, to a large extent, follow what the average Kenyan parent wants them to do. Your average politician will go onto a podium and say unprintable words about people on the other side. And 2 years later, they'll be standing together with this person they said unprintable words about, and say unprintable words about somebody else. It's completely confusing to the average Kenyan youth listening to these fellows and saying, 1 year ago you were saying that this person is an idiot and fit to sit in public office, blah, blah, blah. Today you are standing with that person and saying the other person now is the new idiot and fit to sit in public office. They're confusing. I'm sitting where I sit and thinking like the young people in this country, I get confused. I get completely flabbergasted just listening to these politicians over the past 20 years. Okay. And seeing the positions that they held and the positions they have held over the past 20 years, it is confusing. And therefore, when the young people go out there and express their confusion and look at the politicians and say, I don't know what exactly you're doing, I identify with them.
Okay. When we get back from the break, Steve, I'll begin with you, Dr. Lukoye, as well as Dr. Kanga and Sheikh Ibrahim Lithome, as we proceed with this discussion on who is divorced from the morals and the ethics here on the broadcast, and to what extent can criticism happen on both ends, and the stretching of that freedom of speech, and when it becomes legal and when it becomes morally wrong and legally wrong is what we'll be discussing here on the broadcast when we get back from the break, and we'll sample your feedback in the course, of this broadcast before we finish up. We are back with more after the break. Stay tuned.